So when I went to see Weiwei in his Berlin studios a few days ago, he told me that as a 10-year-old boy, he fell in love with the German poet Heinrich Heine. And he told me about his favorite verse in a poem that Heine had written in 1844 about crossing a border into Prussia and watching the suspicious and diligent Prussian border guards rifle through his trunk and his suitcase and his books looking for political illicit materials. At the time, Heine wrote this: Ihr Toren, die ihr im Koffer sucht, hier werdet ihr nichts entdecken. Die Konterbande, die mit mir reist, die habe ich im Kopfe stecken. Roughly translated, that is, you fools, you search my luggage. You won't find anything there. The contraband you're looking for is inside my mind. Now, that was my translation, not Heine's, I apologize. But Weiwei, here we are in what was once Prussia. So let's talk about dangerous minds and borders. You are an artist, you are a dissident like Heine, and in a sense you are a refugee, one who chose to come to Germany in the summer of 2015, like so many others. Why Germany?
Why? I don't know. You can't hear me? No. Should I take it off? Leave it. Okay.
Double mic.
Hello. First, it was very nice to be here. And why Germany? I was self-detained for years. Suddenly, they said, you have your passport. So the day I received my passport, the American embassy called me and said, can you come to the embassy? The ambassador wants to see you, which is very rare in China. Ambassador wants to see you. Before I take my journey, like next day. So I went to there. The ambassador is very nice, very kind man. The first question he asked me is, why Germany? It's very interesting. I think it comes from an American ambassador. So I told him, Germany made a constant effort to try to get me out. It's so persistent, and Germans are very stubborn. And they keep asking Chinese government, is he a criminal? The Chinese never really formally accused me. They said no. Then why don't you let him out? He can teach in our, he has teaching position in Utica, which is Berlin Art University. So China simply don't know how to answer that. This kind of practice in Germans' foreign policy, it somehow worked.
So you think it's different? Do you think the Germans are more insistent on the values than, say, France, the US?
I do think so. If you say, of course, Germans have strong relations with Beijing, and they make every deal they wanted, but still, they would let Beijing to understand their principle, which is very important. That when you're dealing with powers, you really have to let whoever you talk to understand you. I mean, respect only comes from they understand the difference, then they may respect you.
Yeah. You started getting interested in refugees around the time that you were held in your own home as a prisoner for 4 years. Tell us about why and how you got interested in the subject of refugees, which has been so important for your work.
Well, at the beginning, like everyone else, we read the news, we see the situation is beyond imagination. But every time like this, I refuse just turn my face away. I want to look even deeper or to see what is really, something I can feel I connect to. So around 2014, there's a Iraqi pavilion in Venice. The lady who has a foundation asked me if I want to become a jury to select some drawings from that Iraqi refugee camp. So that's the first time I heard refugee camp. I said, oh, yes, I can do that. I asked why. They said, because if you do that, you may help us, our Iraqi pavilion, to generate some notice or public notice. So I said, okay. So when I select those drawings, I realize who those people are. And I asked the foundation, I said, I have to send 2 persons to your refugee camp to find out more.
You couldn't travel, but you sent 2 of your
Yeah,
collaborators.
I cannot travel. I don't have my passport. But so she agreed. She said, yes, welcome. So we have 2 team members go to there. We did over 100 interviews. We did videos. We did photos. But I have no idea what to do with it. It's just for my personal curiosity to understand the situation, who they are, why they wanted to, how they become a refugee.
And what was the most interesting, striking thing to you when your helpers came back and showed you the answers of 100 Iraqi refugees or refugees in Iraqi camps? What stood out? What did people say?
One thing stick out with the answers, I always have a question, what's their future? Where they want to go after this camp? At that time, I don't really realize in average refugees will stay same status as 25 years or more. So I always ask, what's the future? And I see many answers. It says Germany.
Germany.
I was very surprised to see why Germany, but as a question, I never really, it's no chance you ask a second question. So yeah, that's quite surprising.
And of course, then you came to Germany, but you also spent a lot of time with the refugees making your film, Human Flows. And you say you can connect to these people, you can identify them. You even say, they are me. Your personal story has been very important in this journey. And you, when you were born, your father became a refugee. He was exiled to the Gobi Desert to clean public toilets. You grew up in injustice. To what extent would you say that your childhood is the window through which you explore your art today?
I think I never really realized how childhood experience would have a profound meaning when you grow up. I always try to refuse my memory or my early experience. But till very late, till even this moment, I realized somehow we always been haunted by the early experience. And of course, I do feel identified with people who are in difficult situation, who life have more problems, seems they always have a more interesting story to tell. So, that's why I feel somehow I share this kind of feeling with them.
Your father was a famous Chinese poet. I think Pablo Neruda called him the prince of Chinese poetry, and others called him the Neruda of China. He was an idealist, a communist, a romantic, who then was distrusted by the authorities. So you grew up with a father who in a way experienced something very similar to what you experienced later. At what point did you decide, in a way, to step into your father's footsteps, become an artist? Because you were on a farm at the time.
Yes, but when the year I was born, my father no longer as the most important poet, but become the most dangerous anti-revolutionary so-called criminal. But that time he been sent to exile in most remote town, which is as far as distant from the capital. So I grew up with him. So for me, it's a given condition. I don't know the other conditions. So I spent about 17, 18 years in that town. We would never imagine there's a day we can leave that town. And, but my father always trying to comfort my mom to say, let's think we are born here. So even that idea, even you as a criminal being sent so far away, you still have to convince yourself you are born there. Nothing familiar in that town. We don't even have a furniture with us. we live underground. So it's impossible for me to think, or for my family to think I will become an artist, because all those trouble come from he become an artist, or he studied in Paris. He's early modernist poet, and all his lifetime trouble only because he's artist. So he could never even agree to think I will become an artist.
What did he want you to become?
He wanted me to become I think what's in his mind is a safety, so become a worker. But at my status in China, you cannot become a worker. Worker is most trusted people. So you become a farmer, who is is bottom of the society. So, but I started working the farm since I growing up, and I do all the farming works. I don't want to become a farmer, because I know what's it like to become a farmer in China. It's basically just like a slave. But of course, besides farmer, there's no other choice. You cannot become a doctor. You have to be highly trusted. Or even become a soldier, you need a very high family status. That means you have to be three generations of the poorest people, so you can be trusted. Revolutionary would trust you to become a soldier. So I don't know what to do, but luckily Chairman Mao died, the Cultural Revolution finished, and the university started to open its door after 10 years shutting down. So somehow I get into Beijing Film Institute. That's, first year they start to accept students.
And on Monday you told me that artists are free thinkers, they are liberal thinkers, they ask questions and they challenge authority. Is art always political for you?
For me, the art I loved is always political. Picasso is very political to me. All those important artists, they always have very political opinions. Duchamp is very political to me because he just subverts the whole, the French type of art. He become very intellectual. He talk about art have to serve certain content. He said that the art always have a content. If you talk about medieval art or Renaissance, a good art always have a strong content which relate, changing, giving new definition to aesthetics, have a strong moral manifesto, and always have a strong philosophy behind it.
So, what I'm quite struck by, your little blue book, which some of you may have seen, Humanity, is full of wonderful gems of sentences that Ai Weiwei has said, pearls of wisdom, I should say. And there's one that I want to share with you, because it really struck me that it summed up the really rather radical humanism that you represent, a sort of radical cosmopolitanism that is particularly radical in these days of receding liberalism. We have to give every refugee essential protection. The tragedy is not only that people have lost their lives, the tragedy is the people who, in the very rich nations, have lost their humanity. So to me, you base everything in your value system around this one simple truth: we are all humans, we are all equal, and we need to have each other's back. What is the moral significance then of national borders? Is there any?
Well, borders is human-made thing, natural. In the nature, you have rivers, mountains, which sometimes serve as borders, but they are much more friendly. Even river changes its path, and so we all know the humans are created equal. That's a very essential foundation of our modernism. We believe that, and this is the 21st century, and we have a globalization. The real border, we all know, is not the physical border. All those powerful people, they have very different borders. So I think, of course, we set up those kind of borders, divide people, and which is very profit-making. It shows some kind of games we are playing with, And sometimes we want circle even to be smaller, the border become tighter, so the games can be played in certain way. But any border, if it's within human intelligence, is questionable. Very often, most of them are inhuman. So.
The Greek migration minister appears in your film at one point, and he sort of says very clearly, Europe now has this choice. Either it chooses xenophobia or it chooses openness. And I wonder, having been in Germany now for 3 years, exactly the 3 years that this refugee situation is played out here, do you think the balance has flipped towards more xenophobia?
I think there's so many levels when we talk about the real problem. Refugees is a very real problem. I mean, how can you, honestly want to invite a foreigner or someone into his home? So it's really how we understand ourselves, how we look at and our home, the capacity, and how we can creatively dealing with the problems to make it easier for the people who really need help. So I don't think those kind of things even in agenda, in the political, high political level. People are just trying to use old tactics or policies to either ignoring the problem or try to push it away. But this is not something you can push away. If I have 65 million people being forced out of home, we have to ask, what happened, It's right in front of us. It's not going to disappear. Then we have to find a solution if we think we have any intelligence. If any policy in state level still can working, this certainly has to be discussed.
And it's back to this question of borders and this question, ultimately, do we owe more to our fellow citizens than we owe to citizens of other countries? You seem to say no. We owe everybody the same. But is that politically viable?
No, I think depends how you look at it. The world is not like before. You have first world, then you still can't maintain the business. After globalization, if you take the materials out of the what is made in foreign, if you go to German market, the shelf will be totally empty. We are so much benefited, enjoyed, and profited by this whole globalization. So responsibility have to come. It's not asking for mercy or some kind of, it's responsibility has long time been neglected, and that we have to pay for that.
Do you think, Germany in one way was a country that really stood out in 2015 because it opened its borders at a time when many countries were reluctant to do so, and many didn't at all. Is there significance in the fact that your film, Human Flows, hasn't done very well in Germany, but has done very well in other countries? How do you explain that? Are Germans hypocrites?
Yeah, the film has been done very badly in Germany, but I was very surprised. Germany is a nation least accept 1.2 million refugees. And of course, those refugees, it's not, they're being accepted. That doesn't mean their life has been accepted or they have been have integrated with the society. For it's, I don't know, it will take their lifetime or 2 generations if they're lucky. So for me, I've been here 3 years. I couldn't even tell taxi driver in my home. Every time I tried, I feel how stupid I am. I cannot pronounce the words. And we were sitting in the car, and I have to wait for my son to repeat my words. It sounded exactly the same, but the driver would say, "Okay." Lifetime I never feel so difficult to communicate. But think about refugee. How could they ever feel comfortable in this kind of society? So
It's quite interesting. You had your own little brush with the far right in a Chinese restaurant the other night. Alice Weidel, who is one of the leaders, one of the most prominent leaders of the AfD in Germany, came up to Weiwei and asked for a selfie. Do you want to tell us what happened?
Yeah, daily I would have from 20 to 150 people asking for selfie. For me, as long as there's light, there's a cell phone, and we can achieve a selfie. But I never took it lightly. I think my selfie just as good as when Rembrandt painted his self-portrait. Or Van Gogh have no subject to paint, just paint himself, like so colorfully, like a mad roaster or something, So I take selfie with people, with cat, with anybody, any livelihood or. So she posts this selfie immediately on the social media, and it generates such discussion in Germany. Germans like to discuss anything. If they couldn't find something, they would discuss the discussion itself. So, they always say, why Weiwei must be tricked, or, to take selfie with this impossible lady. That makes me thinking, why so impossible? Because she's publicly elected. She has more followers on social internet than me, doubled it. So, she has rights to take her selfie and express her private feelings. I mean, nobody can judge that because of her political stance. So that's my answer.
It makes me want to read another quote from your little book. You say, I have great sympathy for people who fear migrants for their lack of knowledge and as a result, their lack of humanity. So in a way, you really hit an important point there, the empathy with the other side, the need to talk to each other in a very polarized society and try to understand each other and raise awareness as you do. And I was just wondering, just quickly flipping back, I know we're close to running out of time, but I'm told I can have a few more minutes because I want to throw it open to the audience in a minute, so get your questions ready. When you were in house arrest in China, 4 years is a long time, and you had these Chinese people, these officials coming to mind you, to talk to you. You talked to them, you got to know them presumably, you had these conversations. These were people too. What did you talk about?
We talk about anything, but at the beginning they asked me anything. I have a bad memory, obviously. I don't remember, or according my memory, or I learned from Reagan's answer to Congress. I couldn't remember it, or it's very famous. So it really works. But then they told me, whenever we talk about art, you remember everything. We cannot even stop you talking. So, which it does, they're very smart. But one day, at the last, before I leave the nation, they said, you have your passport, but I have one question. Is that true we made you so famous? I said, yes, without a strong nation like China, I will never become so famous. So they really think that, and I think this very sincere question, I have a very sincere answer. I think that's how I get out from that situation.
Your mother still lives there. Do you go back, or could you go back sometime?
I want to go back, because I'm still a Chinese passport holder, and my mom refused me. She definitely says, don't ever come back. I come to see you. But she's 86. I don't think she can really move around.
You have a little son too. And I want to throw it open. Who would like to ask a question? Gentleman over here.
Hi, I have a question about empathy. Do you believe that social media and the fleeting nature of digital news either aids empathy or hampers empathy?
So the question is whether social media, which you use and which became a problem in China, whether that aids empathy, helps empathy between human beings, or actually harms it?
I think media is media. It only bring out what's in us. You know, we have to believe if we talk about humanity, everybody has this kind of sympathy or some kind of original feelings about what is happiness, what is pain, what is, you know, what we fear about. So social media certainly provides a lot of communication and make it so efficient. And, you know, even our president loves the social media. Some, you know, they would tweet on 3 o'clock in the morning. So you can see they already think the old structure is not working. You know, they use some new structures. But of course, it cannot solve everything. It still takes an individual to act, to make even just one idea or one decision one day which would benefit their own soul. I mean, if there's a soul. So that's my answer.
How about the ladies? Any ladies with questions?
We're already over time.
There's a lady here.
Okay.
Come on, ladies. Okay, we'll give the gentleman a shot, and then I want a lady.
Thank you, and thank you for your work. Why are powerful governments so afraid of artists? And why is the artist always the first one to be abused and attacked by powerful governments?
Why is the Chinese government so scared of artists, and why are they the first ones to be attacked?
I don't think Chinese artists or government are scared of artists or art. They are scared of freedom. But not every art reflects on the words of freedom. So I have been singled out. You know, there's plenty of artists in China doing very well. They're selling sky high, and they're being loved by government.
Farah.
Farah Nayeri, New York Times. Weiwei, very nice to see you. I was just wondering, looking at what you've been doing the last few years since you moved to Germany, refugees have become really the central theme of your work. And I wondered whether you are now looking to develop your art in another direction and perhaps branch off into a new theme of inspiration, or we're going to see more on refugees coming from you in your studio.
Well, actually, refugees not the same, but humanity is the same. You know, I did a Sichuan earthquake research. I did a lot of social media activities in relating to human rights, freedom of speech. I always think those values is the foundation for today, or liberation, you know, or liberty. Based on those foundations, I see how terribly those issues has been neglected. We always think we already granted freedom, which is a totally illusion. We'll never have freedom if we don't really fight those meanings ourselves, because it's meaningless. It's just empty words. So that's why I feel every of my work somehow relate to this kind of issue.
Final 2 questions. This is your chance. Any more questions? Okay, great. Then I have one. I've been dying to ask you this because you obviously love Heinrich Heine, and we talked about him on Monday. And you said the one thing you really loved about him is his humor, which is not often a quality associated with Germans. So I was wondering whether you see in contemporary Germany today, in the artist scene, in any genre, anybody who really makes you laugh?
I cannot really even answer the question.
Oh, God.
Yeah, and I think humor is very important. It shows we look on the 2 sides. We have a different ways to look at the same question, or we're trying to look at both directions. So I think that is that's very important to maintain some kind of intelligence, especially in this very difficult time, you know, when things become, normally we think, you know, just black and white. We simply try to simplify things and not to get the meaning of life, which has a lot of details and texture and different kind of lighting and angles. So for artists, I think humor is like air, you know, it's absolutely necessary element.
I hope the fact that we haven't made you laugh quite enough is not the reason that you've hinted you might leave Germany sometime soon. Any ideas where you're going next?
I don't know. I really ask many people trying to find out where should I go, because it's very difficult, because if you have sense of home ever in your life, I certainly realize 60 years old, I never can call any place home. I don't have one street I can remember. I don't have one tree or one well. I would you know, remember the taste of water, or, you know, we always been forced to go to some locations which is unknown, very remote. So it's very hard for me to find some place I really can settle. You know, seems every argument, I can go to anywhere. So that's why since I was given the passport almost 3 years, I traveled to 150 destinations. 150.
Wow.
Which is, yeah.
Thank you, Weiwei. Please join me in thanking Weiwei. That was really,
Thank you.
Really nice.
Okay, folks. That's it. You know, and I never announced that we lost Jordan Wolfson today. He had an installation at the Tate, so he couldn't be with us. So that does it for our conference. I want to just kind of close with a little bit of a wrap up here. When I started covering the art world, I was struck by how many different levels there were to it. The galleries in Chelsea were very different from the galleries in Bushwick, Brooklyn. The auction business was a universe distinct from museums, and the art world does not necessarily mean the art business. Those are two different things. Yet they all affect and inform one another. And this conference, I hope, has been an opportunity for all of us to converse, to collide, to convene. I know I've come away with a few key questions to continue thinking about as a result of our panel discussions. I hope you have too. Among them, what are concrete ways that larger galleries can help smaller ones? How much should museums come to the people rather than expecting people to come to them? And what does that mean in practical terms? And how is financial capacity, for example, a hurdle to getting people of color into the curator pipeline? Those are just a few of my takeaways. I'm sure you have your own. I hope you've come away with a greater sense of connectedness to each other. And I've already been hearing feedback, positive, which I'm grateful for, but I also appreciate your constructive criticisms, among them that it was hard to hear our lunch roundtable discussion leaders, that we'd like to have more visuals, which I can appreciate for an art world crowd, too many American panelists. We will take it all into consideration. You'll be getting surveys, which I do hope you fill out, and we'll welcome your feedback and be responsive to it. We will be in touch soon with information about next year, where and when, and we hope that you'll come back and join us. And a few housekeeping things. Those who are going on excursions or studio tours, please meet in that lunch area entrance right after this. A few thanks that it bears repeating for our sponsors. We couldn't do this without your support, and we're grateful for it. Qatar Museums, AP Global, ArtNet, Mycenas, Assisi, Panorama International, XL, Catlin, Bird in Hand, Ruinar, and Audi. How great were those cars, especially with heels? We're grateful for those. I want to say my own personal thanks to the New York Times team, which has been extraordinary, putting this conference together. Stephen, who had to go, Dorothea, Achilles, Chris, my partner in crime, Fiona, Elsbeth, Louise, Farah for covering this, and my fellow moderators, Motoko, Hillary, Matt, Scott, and Katrin. Our panelists, our lunch table leaders, and especially all of you. Without your engaged, enthusiastic support, this wouldn't have been what it was, and I hope to see you next year. Thank you.